I got a knock at the door with a whole team of lawyers from a very, I should say, efficient and ruthless law firm representing HP, suing me for $17 million. And accompanied with a freezing order that essentially financially handcuffed everything that I owned in the world. But I'm still in a criminal jail, which is a category of jail which houses murderers, rapists, drug dealers, armed robbers, organized crime, all that kind of stuff. So, in fact, one of the first persons that I speak to was in for armed robbery. 2 a.m, and you've got a tiny little cell, and it's pitch black, and you can hear screaming and chairs banging and abuse being shouted, and you've just learned that all your staff have left, and the newspapers are slagging you off, and are you ever going to teach again?
Thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Nick Bell, and I have the absolute pleasure today of interviewing Peter Sage. Now, for those who don't know who Peter Sage is, here are just some of the labels that have been used to describe him in recent times. Enlightened entrepreneur, extreme athlete, master mindset coach, and more recently this year, prisoner at Pentonville. It's been a wonderful journey for Peter of late, and it complements a wonderfully exciting life up until this point. So I am entirely delighted to have the opportunity to sit here and talk to you about the last year and just before then. So thank you.
No, welcome, Nick. It's nice to be able to have a platform to be able to share some of the insights on the journey that I've taken.
I know I've been very excited about having this conversation, and for anybody who was staying up to speed with the case at the start of this year, they would have waited the last 10 months to really hear your side of the story in full. So I think that I want to cut straight to the chase, if that's okay. The information that's readily available in the public domain, and that was available at the start of this year, is a lot of information about things that happened, a lot of the contents of the situation. But the one thing that doesn't go amiss for me really is the lack of context. It's very difficult to understand, looking at the available information, where your mind would have been. Why you made the decisions you made when put in the situations you were put into. So for anybody that isn't familiar or just has seen that one side of the information, I want to give you a platform now to talk us through the timeline. And I mean, again, imagine somebody watching this doesn't know the story. This is the timeline from when the initial deal was struck, your thought behind it, the steps that took you through right up until the start of this year. So we can really get an understanding of the journey you went through before it all became so public.
Sure, and I think you hit on it there, Nick, that no matter what happens in life, context is definitive. And we live in a world where people that prioritize content over context tend to have a limited viewpoint. And for me, it was it's the context of the situation that obviously gives everything meaning. And certainly a lot of lessons in there, but happy to start at the beginning. And when I say the beginning, I mean, if we go back to sort of 2008, I founded or co-founded a company called Space Energy. And I was very passionate about that. The entire concept of space energy was to bring a new form of clean energy to the world. And, call it naive, call it ambitious, call it what have you. But I spent a lot of years and, virtually vast majority of my fortune building or trying to build space energy purely from that place. How can we create a new kind of energy for the planet? Not realizing that there was a lot of entities currently on the planet that wouldn't have that as their top of their supportive agenda, and making some commercial decisions, rightly or wrongly along the way, to try the best we can to make it work. And I found myself, sort of 2010, it's around there, where we were struggling for cash flow. I'd put in all of my available resources, remortgaged my home and all of that. We'd had investors' money coming as well, other people that believed in the project. And so that adds another layer of responsibility. And I came across an opportunity to generate some extra income for the business, which as an entrepreneur I felt was a valid and useful way to be able to do it. And it was essentially buying IT equipment from Hewlett-Packard and various IT manufacturers, and reselling them at a very small margin, very small margins in IT. But I was approached. with people that were seeking to purchase, and being the entrepreneur, I looked at the deal, and at that particular time, I think I justified it in the terms of that it was a win-win. I saw every party involved being able to benefit from that and making money, and so essentially I started buying IT equipment, and over a period of about 3 years, I think I purchased about $12.5 million, paid for it in full. And resold it at a very small margin, maybe 2-3%, and it became a useful extra profit center for the business while we were trying to build not only the space-based side of the business but also the terrestrial-based side of the business as well. And that was really that. I never really thought too much more of it. And then a few years later, I'm living back in England, and I get a knock at the door from the lawyers of Hewlett-Packard.
When you say a few years later, what year was this?
This is 2015.
Okay.
Yeah, so several years later.
Yeah.
And a different country, I get a knock at the door with a whole team of lawyers from a very, I should say, efficient and ruthless law firm representing HP, suing me for $17 million. And accompanied with a freezing order that essentially financially handcuffed everything that I owned in the world, which at that time, having put everything I'd had into space energy and not having a totally successful conclusion to that commercially wasn't that much. And that was a very interesting, what I call bend in the river. Certainly getting that knock at the door.
Okay.
And from my side, what happened after that, certainly in that sort of 24-hour period, was really what led up to the events that led me to Pentonville. And I'm happy to go through a little bit of that if you want some context.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, just to frame it for anyone who doesn't have an understanding, and again, I'm going to talk to you now as if I have very limited understanding as well, so I can try and put myself in the position of people watching in that position. But for anyone who doesn't know, what do you actually go into prison for? We can look at this now, because again, you're talking here about HP coming to your door with a £17 million lawsuit, enough to wake everyone up first thing in the morning, I think. But what was the actual case from there? Because I know that myself, it wasn't about the actual equipment, was it?
No, it was contempt of court. That's the reason I went away. And it was a civil matter. So they were suing me, and essentially, again, a lot of lessons came out. But when they arrived at the doorstep, I read through the documents, and I was a little bit enraged, to be fair, because what I perceived was actually happening in my mind at the time was some form of extortion, bullying, positioning that was unjustified. Clearly, everybody feels that their own actions are justified. But essentially, what was happening, they were trying to sue me for the difference between the wholesale price that they sold it to me for and the retail price in Tesco's, Walmart, whatever it may be, PC World. And I couldn't understand why. They were saying that I said that I wasn't going to resell it. My argument was, well, hang on, I wasn't bound by any terms and conditions. I've never signed a document. I'd never put anything that would or had any level of interaction with HP that bound me for not being able to resell that item.
So this was the crux of it. They were essentially trying to apply reseller rules to you.
Correct. They were putting on essentially a reseller argument. And I wasn't a reseller, never have been. And there was nothing to state. In fact, all of the terms and conditions completely omitted anything that would have prevented me from reselling that once I had full title. And HP were also very aware at various levels that I was reselling that equipment. That's what I didn't understand. That's why I thought it was a win-win.
How do you mean?
Well, the salespeople that were selling us the equipment, they were fully aware that it was being resold, and HP themselves were aware because the people we were selling to, were even paying HP directly.
Okay.
So
That's interesting.
So everybody was making money. In fact, HP probably made way more money than anybody else. I made a few little percent. The people I sold it to obviously made a few percent. HP made a big way. And so I thought everybody was happy. It was a win-win-win in my mind. And so when I saw this fabricated in my mind loss of 17 million, I'm like, where does that come from? Right? It doesn't exist. There is no loss. There's a profit. Yeah, and you guys made a big profit, and you're just suing me to try to get money based on the fact you didn't make as much profit as you would have liked to, and I made a little bit, and now you want to come sue. And the way that it unfolded, it took the story took shape, because they didn't want to go to court, and they were essentially showing up with some financial muscle, with a big law firm and a lot of paperwork to say, hey, listen, give us some of that profit that you made on reselling it, and we'll make all this go away. That was the conversation. That was the actual conversation. And when I saw that, I'm like, I have what I would call a very indigo nature. For those that aren't aware, that the entire concept of indigo children is essentially can be summed up in a few phrases, but people that have very little, respect's probably the wrong word, but we kind of despise rules that don't make sense, especially outdated authoritarian imposition, unjust, and there's a strong and natural and innate kickback against that. But there's a few other factors involved. They searched the house and they found a valuation for my fiance's engagement ring, right, which was about £50,000-60,000. Nice ring. But I met my fiance way after anything to do with HP, and I've got a bully boy solicitor in my face demanding that he takes her ring. Now, I'm not being funny here, guys, but with the best will in the world, and as calm as I was and as polite as I was at the time, up to that point, thinking that this was just a bit of a ruse, you get some people knock on your door at 7 a.m, with what you perceive to be a complete, fabricated, legal strong arm, and start trying to take your fiance's ring. There's definitely a part of a kickback in that.
Did you feel like you were being scapegoated to some degree? Because it feels like you were, there were a few people who were taking benefit from this, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh no, it's Mr. Sage. And then you're the one that's getting the knock on the door, and you're the one that's being taken through this process.
I don't know if it was as much scapegoat as easy target.
Yeah.
They saw my profile as somebody that they thought had a few quid. Let's go. It doesn't cost too much to get the freezing order. In fact, one of the things that really, got me going was when I read through the documents, the only reason they'd been able to get the freezing order from the High Court was that they'd lied to the judge, in my mind, about and said that Space Energy, my company that I'd spent my heart, soul, life savings, and everything, was a complete scam set up to deceive HP. That was the premise they'd gone into court with. Now they knew that was false. And from my perspective, it's like, hang on, guys, let's, you're not playing with a straight bat. Not at that level. I can understand why they did it, because to surprise somebody at the front door, they're going to look at me thinking he's a pretty smart businessman. There's no way he's going to want to go to court. It's going to cost hundreds of thousands in legals. Much rather just pay a quick settlement and we go away. And for them, it's almost a profit center. Me being stupid, egocentric at the time, and sort of indignant as such, decided to roll the dice and kick back. And anyway, I tried to comply as best I could with the freezing order in various respects. There was a few issues around that made it difficult. It was very all-encompassing. But I'll give you one example. 6 months later, they come back and knock at the door with basically a contempt of court application. Okay. One of the charges, and I don't want to get into it here because I don't want to bore people, but I'll just give you an example. One of the charges was I'd failed to deliver bank statements. Okay. Now, at the time, they'd asked for the bank statements, or the court order had asked for the bank statements. So I said, no problem, I've got nothing to hide. I never wanted to go against the court at that level. But they says, no, we don't want your bank statements. We'll prepare the letters of authority, so you sign every single one, so we go to the bank and get the statements. No problem. I signed every single one. 6 months later, they come back and put me in for contempt of court on a charge of the fact that 2 or 3 of the banks hadn't responded to them. And I'm like, guys, any judge looking at this was my mind at the time, any judge looking at this is going to throw it out. They're going to laugh it out. You seriously aren't going to roll the dice on this. And that was my honest and genuine perspective. I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to learn about the court process. I had a lot to learn about my ego. I had a lot to learn about my addiction to being right and essentially believing my own bullshit. That was another part. I talked myself into an argument there thinking I couldn't lose. And the more I talked myself into it, the more it made sense, and the more I says, screw you, let's go and see you in court.
But I guess, in hearing this, I think it would be hard not to feel injustice in this moment if the deal had gone ahead like it had done and that working practice had been there, and then out of the blue these guys turn up on your door, strong-arming you. We know what solicitors can be like, I think you used the word bulldog there. I think that's probably polite. But it feels like an attack. And again, when you then look through how they were able to justify what they were doing 6 months later, it was another attack. Because, as you say, that really, if they wanted a resolution here with you, they would have come to you and said, hey, the bank hasn't responded. But you can see the motive in that moment was quite clearly to attack, because somebody else's fault, they were using it as a stick to hit you with, essentially.
Yeah.
So I can start to understand what brings you, kind of the mindset that you would have and the way that you'd be feeling moving towards it. And then, of course, all of this is going on whilst you're running a business, whilst you're hosting events with 400 people, a minimum in them, whilst you're coaching people all around the world, whilst you are engaged and planning a wedding.
And simultaneously subject to a worldwide freezing order that essentially strangleholds me unless I agree to what their demands are.
So there must have been some stress. I mean, how were you feeling? We know from watching your videos that you've got a lot of techniques and skills in dealing with these situations. But when it really came up in that situation, everything frozen, a lot of people depending on you, a lot of commitments, and then the rug's pulled out from underneath you. How did that feel?
Well, sure. Everybody has their own story. Everybody's got stress in their lives. Would I rather have that level of stress than a diagnosis of an illness that suddenly shifts my perspective on life? Would I rather have that kind of stress than suddenly having a massive breakdown in my relationship, for example? So everything's perspective at the time.
But that ability to step back and do what you did there, to say, well, it could be worse. I could have this, or I could be in that situation. Was that something that you've trained in you and that came natural in the moment? You just naturally, okay, well, other people have it harder. Or was there a time when this hit you and you really had to step back and reflect?
No, obviously the initial shock is always like, oh, okay, didn't see that coming. But for me, I'm a great believer that the river of life is never straight. There's always bends in the river. That's part of the journey. It's part of the game, and whatever's in front of you at the time, if you're in the gym of life, is more weight to lift. Not because it's inconvenient, but because we're here to try to get stronger. Now, we never get to choose what kind of weights come our way most of the time. And there's obviously lessons in there as well. It's not just life's meant to be hard. Life's meant to be amazing, but you don't become an amazing athlete by sitting on the couch. So for me, it was a good practice opportunity for me to demonstrate some of the stuff that I probably teach, and need to step in front of the mirror and rehearse myself.
Excellent. And I do want to dig a lot deeper into the introduction and when you went into the prison and some of the firsts that you had while you were in there. But before we get to that stage, there was a period, of course, when it was at the start of this year, when I think a court date was set for the contempt of court hearing, and I know that at the time you were completely. There was not one iota of doubt in your mind as to whether you were going to walk in there and walk out again. You really didn't see yourself staying in there. So what was that moment? Because when they read out the decision in court, your beliefs of where you thought it were going to go were completely scuppered in that moment. I mean, that must have left you feeling confused, concerned. What was the first thought that came to your mind then? It wasn't in the room as well.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really on the actual decision. It was actually the case, the 3-day trial. Because I went in there thinking I couldn't lose. I had all my evidence, I had everything in place, and I learned a lot about the legal system. The legal system is not about who's right or wrong. It's about who tells the best story. And I think anybody that's actually been through court would fully agree with that. It's got facts are very subjective when it comes to storytelling. And they've obviously got a case, and they've got some very proficient storytellers. I don't want to put blame in here because I feel there's a much bigger reason for why things happen. But it's as the trial went on, obviously I had a lot of questions asked, and I think every parent can say that a 5-year-old can make a parent look stupid by asking the right questions. That's their job. And if you look at the opposing counsel, they had an objective, and that was their job was to fit that. But there was a complete lack of read the transcripts. There was no questions or defence in any way that came out of our representation.
So why was that?
No idea. I mean, for a start, I was on legal aid because all of my accounts were frozen. So I didn't have the opportunity, the luxury to be able to go and select the kind of counsel that I'd want. But it was, again, for whatever reason, there wasn't a lot of incentive, I guess. But it just never happened. And so a lot of things were said about what the judge was saying. I don't blame the judge 1 second. The judge did an outstanding job of assessing the facts as they were presented to him, which were just far more balanced on one side than the other. I did make some big mistakes in court.
Which were?
I went in there with that sort of fire in my belly of, I'm going to prove these guys wrong. Right? This is unjust. Screw you. And it was that energy, and it was completely the wrong energy. I wasn't there to battle HP. That should have happened at a separate court date where I argued the toss on their, what I perceived to be, or has now been virtually proven, false allegations. What I should have been in there was to apologise to the court for, falling foul of a freezing order in a way that it was contrived to, trip me up. But I didn't, and that was my biggest mistake. I went in there with my ego blazing, basically making the judge a witness to a he said, she said argument. Right? And the judge quite rightly saw me as somebody that wasn't contrite, that wasn't apologetic, that, because I wasn't. I was there to tell HP to go stuff themselves.
And this realization now, this knowledge that you went in there, the ego was out of whack, did this come to you straight away? Like you walked out after those 3 days and you thought, I played that hand wrong? Or was this something that came to you?
No, that was more of a dawning realization when I was in the tiny little room.
It all comes crashing down at that point, doesn't it? And you can see
it was halfway through. I'm actually, that's when I finally remember turning to Thea and I says, honey, I think there might be actually a chance here that I could go away. This is not going the way that I thought it would go, as life doesn't. And and I remember I did 15 pages of summing up, which I passed over to my barrister, none of which was read out, none of which was put forward to in any kind of formulated logical argument. And and I was more in shock at that point. What I should have done was probably sacked my representation and stood up myself. But again, my ego would have probably come across again at that point. But it is what it is. I felt that I had such a strong counter argument to every single point that no judge on the planet would even entertain it. And if you read the actual affidavits that were put forward, where all of my points were in there, you'd read it and think, why are we even going to court? But again, that's there's lessons to learn on there. And it was my ego that basically stood up, and the court took that almost as an affront, and rightly so. I was bang out of order in terms of that level of context, because I was there to prove HP was wrong, not apologise to the court.
Yeah, I get that. And in that room, so you've had this 3-day build-up where you're starting to sense that things aren't, going your way. You can see ahead the way the river's bending, and then the judgment's read out. Now, I guess at this point, as it starts to trickle into your mind that this may be a possibility, you're talking with Thea, you're sharing that with her, so she's starting to understand it maybe as well. But nonetheless, for her, when that was read out, it must have hit her hard, because you're her world, you're about to be married, and all of a sudden you're pulled away from her. I mean, there must have been a huge feeling of guilt in that moment on your part.
As kind of a warrior, as a light worker, whatever you want to call it, I was prepared to go in and do, if I had to go in and do what I need to do, I need to do that. And if you've got kids, you must know what it's like. If you've got to go live on dog food for 6 months, no problem. But if you've got to force your family to do the same, it's a different game. Of course, yeah. And things been such a rock. Everyone's always got their issues, but relationships are a crucible in themselves for personal growth. But the hardest moment, when as a civil prisoner, as a non-criminal prisoner, you automatically only do half, the sentence. So when he read out contempt, which has a maximum of 2 years, which, if you look at the historical side, is usually for people that flagrantly breach court orders for millions of dollars and all the rest of it. And none of that had happened at that level. He gave me an 18-month sentence. Of course, I remember turning around to Thea and says, I'll see you in 9 months. But at the point I turned around to see her, she was crying her eyes out. And it obviously hit her. Mate, the hardest part for me was being able to go, walk down those steps and not be able to help. Because the one person you want at the back of you, at the side of you, is your rock. You now can't do anything about. My life lives for being able to help people. My life lives for being able to, go out and add value to people. That's what I'm about. Am I perfect? Far from it. But the one person you really want to help the most, that you then are taken away from and force them into a situation that they're not ready for. They certainly didn't ask for. I can go do my workout in the gym. You throw me some heavy weights, I'm okay with that. But to drag somebody along, on your mistakes, to start lifting weights that they didn't ask to lift, that was tough.
So I get that in that moment you turn around, she's in tears, you know that you're being pulled apart at this time.
for anybody who hasn't done that walk, can you talk to us about what happens then? So you're in court, this is said, you're taken straight on, what's the process?
Well, I'll pre-frame it for a second, because I have a pretty much a default mindset, and I've been very, very fortunate in this regard. I've been in personal growth and development for, close to 3 decades. I recognise not everybody has that level of experience. I'm not good at many things, but the areas that I have spent consistent time focusing on of my life have centered around more personal growth. So I have a slightly more established mindset when it comes to positivity. Let's call it that. So once I'm aware of that, I know that there's no changing what has already happened. I can't regret, look back, think if only, what if. That's a game I don't play. If the milk's spilt, the milk's spilt. How do we, we may not like it because it's a brand new carpet. It may be inconvenient because I've got, people arriving shortly, whatever, but the milk is spilt. So how do we now address that? Now, when I realized, I was walking down, I still have a mission. My mission is to help people. So when I went down and I sat in the cell, I started noticing in the cells in the courtroom, I started noticing that the people that were like the staff members, the court officers and things, were pretty miserable. Right? Now they're dealing with people that are kicking back. They're dealing with people whose world has fallen out. They're dealing with people who are in a mess or angry or resentful. It's not their problem. They're there to do a job. So I said if I could make it a mission to see if I could make them all smile before I left. And I did, and we had it. It was my first magic moment, from leaving there. Again, I tried not to put too much attention on where Dia was at until I knew what was happening myself. It was all new for me, but my focus was still on what could I do to try to cheer people up, and by cheering them up, hopefully I was probably cheering myself up as well, to not distract myself as such, but shift my focus.
For sure, and I think that when you see people when they get into traumatic situations, it's the natural thing to look after each other. It takes the onus of accepting that you are in that predicament, doesn't it? And I think it's a wonderful thing to have trained into you to be able to do that. So how long are we talking about? So you're walking down here, you see these guys looking super miserable, you're trying to make them happy, you've just left there. What's the time period between that moment when you looked at her and said, I'll see you in 9 months, and the next moment when you had got to speak with her again?
Well, I was in the court for about 3 hours in holding cells, then the wagon came, and I was put into the van and driven to Pentonville. And I arrived at Pentonville. I remember being ushered in through the sort of induction process, if you like, handing in my watch and my suit and my belt and all that. And I got my issue sort of prison clothes, as it were, which weren't orange, or white or anything like that. They were just standard sort of sweatpants and shirt. And I remember the officer turning around to me. He says, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." I says, "Are you a policeman?" I'm like, "No." And that's not the label you want to be walking into prison with anybody thinking, right? And I've got no experience, but I've certainly seen movies. And I said, "No, why?" He says, "Oh, you just strike me as somebody that looks a little too calm to be here." Okay. So I then went into a room, which is like a holding room, where you do your induction. There's like questionnaires, and you go for a medical, and then you finally get your bedding. And I was there, and that was interesting because there was about 20, 30 people in that room. Okay. And so I'm now in a sort of fraternity of people that I've never been in with before. These are convicted criminals. I'm the only non-criminal at this point, pretty much in the jail.
Because it's a civil case, and
I've never been accused of a crime. There's no criminal aspect to this at all. But I'm still in a criminal jail, which is a category of jail which houses murderers, rapists, drug dealers, armed robbers, organised crime, all that kind of stuff. So, in fact, one of the first persons that I speak to was in for armed robbery. And I remember sat there and I'm watching, and I'm looking at all of the different things that are going on, because I'm fascinated as well. I'm a student of human behaviour. I always want to know what makes people tick. What makes them do what they do. That's why the self-reflection was so useful for me. But and I remember chatting to this one guy, Jamie, where I was trying to help him out. He was assessing patterns, and I got called forward for my medical exam. And I sit there, and I remember the doctor turning around, and this was within 2 or 3 hours of sitting in this room, turning around and said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Are you undercover?" I'm like, I started smiling, and I actually turned around and said, "Actually, I think I might be." Right? And he looked at me, and I says, "Well, look, I'm clearly here for a reason. I said, I think there's a lot of people that can benefit from my work, that do benefit from around the world, but there's a lot of people that could benefit that probably never get access to it, and especially the kind of people in here. And he kind of looked at me, and we had a chat, and I said, do you mind me asking why you asked the question? And he said, you seem far too happy for your first ever time in prison. and it did make me think, my focus was, my world has just took a very sharp left turn. Everything that you think that you're about to go home and carry on with your life with has just been shot to pieces. And for me, it was a case of, what's my focus now? And I want to go in there and see if I can actually do what I do. Right? And balance the whole aspect of the people I've let down, the missing my my girl, being in what was clearly a dangerous environment, violence, drugs, death, and just basically stepping into very much an unknown.
Okay, fantastic. So we're starting to get a picture now, and I'm starting to see, I guess, as you alluded to there, the 3 decades worth of personal development focus coming through, because this is a very testing situation at the best of times, but when you've just been pulled from the arms of your crying wife-to-be, knowing that she's now going to have to, have broad shoulders and look after everything, and you're going into Britain's most notorious prison, to be upbeat and almost skipping through, I think, you probably look back on your 30 years of study with a lot of gratitude at that point. But again, let's come back just a full circle and look at the initial question. And that was the time between the departure from Thea in the courtroom to when you next had an opportunity to speak with her. Because you can see there's a journey that's gone on between there. So how long was that? Was it hours?
It was when I was in the waiting room. So I got given a PIN number and I could make a call, and I called her, and again she's been in the game. She's been with me for enough years to have her own sort of positive mind frame and resources to draw on, and she sort of went into more the masculine mode at that point because she's task focused, mission orientated. We've got a business to run, we've got 50 odd staff. We've got a seminar that was about to happen, with hundreds of people showing up that now just completely gone to pot. There's a lot of questions that weren't answered, from what was going on. So she was on the phone. She was with one of the staff members at the time that was one of the management team, and they kind of put a plan together, and they're going to execute the plan, and everything was going to move forward, and we'll handle this. Don't worry. And it was very much sort of like listen, here's the challenge. Let's deal with the challenge. Nice. And she wanted to know that I was safe, obviously. And I was in there, I was obviously with making some new friends. But that was within probably about 6 hours, I'd say, of seeing her.
Okay, so a nice period of time afterwards, and I guess that must have been incredibly reassuring for you, knowing that she had stepped into that kind of energy with it.
Yeah.
That she had done that. And I guess, one of the most symbolic images, I think, if we look on Hollywood, where Hollywood has portrayed jail or prison through the years, is the door slamming shut. I mean, you only have to think back to the Shawshank Redemption, where the guy breaks down on his first night in the prison. And I always think myself that if I were in that position, hearing that door slam shut for the first night would send a shudder down my spine. So what was the first night like? When you're on your own in that room?
Well, I was actually in the waiting room till about 11 p.m. So it was quite late by the time I got my bedding issue, and there was only one other guy in there, so he was going to be my cellmate. And his name was Ali. And he looked like his world had completely fallen through. And so, we go into this small, tiny room. You've got a bunk bed, like a 6 foot by 3 foot room with a toilet, and no privacy as such with the two of you. A tiny little window, and he smoked, which was that was tough for me. But obviously, want to hear his story, and it was almost heartbreaking, to be fair. He'd gone to court that day as part of a sort of a minor charge that he was up on, and he wasn't going to court for trial. He had to go there for some administrative purpose, and so he'd parked literally on a 30-minute parking zone. He was on his way to work. He'd walked in, and it was to be for an adjournment for another date, but the judge had remanded him instead of letting him go. Now that was bad enough, but that was on the Friday. He spent his life savings getting married on the Saturday. His wedding was the next day, and he'd just been put on remand and didn't see it coming, and had to. And you that's where you really want a supportive wife to be. But his whole world had just fallen in. I didn't see it coming that morning. Popped into court, dressed for work, parked on a 30 zone, and bang, getting married next day. And none of that's happening. So I spent some time with him on the induction wing. There's virtually no social. So you get one shower every 2 days on there. You get let out of the cell for about 40 minutes every 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you and Ali.
We had the weekend together. Yeah. And of course by the Monday, I'd pretty much made a request that is there any chance I could be moved to a non-smoking wing, and there's one non-smoking wing in Pentonville, which was D wing. And by the time I'd left on the Monday, we shook hands, and he was in much better shape. He actually turned around and his parting comment made my magic moments list. I kept a magic moments list from pretty much going in. And his parting comment says, I thought my world had fallen in when I came here. He says, but now I know that I probably came here to meet you. And it's stuff like that was feeding me against the negativity of the environment.
Because I know you've always been a fan of cataloguing and documenting and amassing evidence of when these wonderful things happen, whether it be things that you're grateful for or magic moments that you want to remember. So was that practice valuable for you?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I mean, the challenge was I couldn't get pen and paper for quite a while. Yeah, I mean, Pentonville, if you've ever seen Shawshank Redemption, Pentonville's a pretty similar prison. But it's 200 years old. But the exercise yard is massively tiny if you rarely get there. And there's no communal eating. You eat in your cell. It's a BCAT prison, which means that it's for high level prisoners. And from that perspective, I didn't expect to be there long because I'm a civil prisoner.
But how can a civil prisoner go into such a substantial, significant prison? How does that work? Because
it's kind of like a holding prison from the court.
Okay.
So you go there, you get categorized. I was categorized as soon as I walked in as like a civil prisoner, so I'm decategorized. I'm the lowest risk.
Okay.
I'm the only non-criminal pretty much there. So usually within a week or so, you'd be shipped out to a more relaxed sort of open, based prison where you have your own key to your cell.
Yeah.
There's no gates, there's no doors. You can walk out the prison if you wish. I mean, you wouldn't want to do that, but But that's kind of what was expected, and that's what should really happen for a civil prisoner.
Okay. So back to the magic moments list. Then I'm intrigued now because I know how well you document and journal these things normally. So I guess if you're in your cell for 47 hours and 20 minutes every 2 days, then it must have been such a, I don't want to say a crutch, but such a valuable tool for you to have there to be able to record information and do what you did. So are there any particular magic moments that you recorded that really stand out?
Well, yes, I think, as I said earlier, the fuel for being able to help stay positive is being able to document the things that you are positive about, because out of sight, out of mind. And so I started a magic moments list pretty much mentally, at least to start with, when I went in, until I was lucky enough to get some pen and paper, which wasn't easy, but I managed to get in the first week. And then I started writing down my magic moments. And there was, I'm sure we'll reference a few at some point, but I'd say one of the first biggest magic moments for me, I think, was then hearing Thea's voice again on the phone a few days later, because I hadn't got to the phone. That was big, and she was obviously worried over the weekend what was happening, because there's no phones in the cells, there's no computers, there's no nothing. This is raw, sort of unmodernized kind of prison. And there's one working phone for maybe every 50, 100 prisoners. So there's a big queue. You're out for 30, 40 minutes. Do I have a shower or do I make a phone call? Because that's pretty much your choice. And sometimes you stay near the phone and you're in the queue because you only get like 3 minutes on the phone and then it cuts off and there's no redial. So it's a very small window to be able to make a call. And the numbers have to be authorized. Here was the only number I could call. And so being able to have that level of voice connection on the phone was always a magic moment, to be fair.
Superb. And we referenced Thea and the journey that she went through, because this is the fact, isn't it, that when something happens to you in this respect, if you go to prison, it's not just you that goes to prison, it's not just you that serves that sentence. The others around you are close to you serve it as well. And we talked about Thea and the impact of her. I'm sure she grew exponentially through the process, but Thea wasn't the only person close to you. You had people who you were mentoring, you'd been coaching for a period of time. You had 50 employees, as you referenced earlier, who financially depended on you. So there are a lot of people through this process who would have felt, especially with the mixed information that was in the public domain and how open to interpretation that can be, would have felt hurt by this situation. And, you know, again, depending on the information they took in, would have felt like you had directly hurt them.
Yeah.
So given a platform now, how would you address that? If you had an opportunity now to speak to those people, what would you say?
Well, first thing, 100% is that obviously I never intended to hurt anybody. My actions had no intention behind them to want to try to drag anybody else into the gym with me. You know, this was my fight against HP, and you know, if I'd have thought for 1 second that what would have happened and impacted other people in the way that it did, you know, I'd have probably sat down and done a deal with them. You know, but that was my own myopic focus on my own selfish needs. Yeah, I didn't see the wider implications of what would have happened had I gone away at that level, and there's a lot of people confused. A lot of people followed my work sometimes for years, and ironically, you know, I talk a lot about not putting people on a pedestal for this very reason, and the fact that if you put somebody on a pedestal, you by very definition you minimize your own sense of greatness, you minimize your own sense of self. So in some respects it was very good that anyone that had me on a pedestal was able to knock me off, and actually see the fact that no, you know, sun doesn't shine out of his arse. You know, he hasn't got all the answers, he is human, he does make mistakes, and that was useful in some respects. But seeing how some of the people were financially affected, inconvenienced by having to, you know, coming to a seminar they thought they were going to learn answers to that didn't, and then thought, well, hang on a minute, who the hell is this guy to be able to teach me anyway if he's going to jail, and all that kind of stuff. You know, reading the stuff that was exceptionally one-sided, you know, in the press, and I wasn't surprised about that. I've got videos on YouTube that are years old that slag off the media and the press and people that give people the reasons why they should never watch them. So it was only a matter of time before they had an opportunity to have a go back at me in the way that they do. But you know, for me, being able to, it was, you know, hurting or causing harm to anybody else in any respect, whether it was financially, inconvenienced, you know, emotionally, was probably one of the toughest parts there. Again, Thea aside, and Thea took a lot of abuse off that too. She's a full-time college student. She's now got people ringing up, swearing down the phone at her, saying, "Where's my effing money back? I know where you go to college. I'm going to go." You know, people have put her details out there. She was locking the door at night, living on her own.
Wow.
You know, it's, you know, and I'm like a caged tiger inside, pacing up and down, not absolutely helpless.
So you're aware of those things happening?
Oh yeah.
Outside when you're on the inside.
And that's tough for me. That was a big lesson for me. How do I deal with being able to not take control of a situation that I normally would step into? How does she be able to cope with not having the person there that, you know, as a rock, to be able to, you know, back to back take on the world with? Right? And everybody grew. You know, we had people like yourself, you know, suddenly lose all of their income. We had, you know, other people that depended on me. And, you know, one of the things that it's tough, but it's factual. If you get thrown into the deep end, you can only swim. People aren't as fragile as you think, and sometimes it's what's required. There's a lot of ecosystems in the planet that are fire-driven. They're designed to get burned to the ground every 30 years and rebuilt. That's how nature evolves it. Every tree needs pruning before it gives better fruit. And I certainly got pruned and burnt to the ground in many respects, but I also recognize that other people did too. And while hindsight is a beautiful thing, and I got many letters from people that then turned around to me from internally that said that this was probably the best thing that happened to them. That you can't really see that at the time. Steve Jobs says you can't join the dots going forwards. And that's that uncertainty shook up a lot of people, and I took a lot of blame for that, and rightly so, because again, they never got asked to get took to the gym. That was my bad. And for someone who's driven by the need to want to help people and add value and raise consciousness and push forward, and on my own journey of doing what I can, that was a big kick in the teeth. And I felt really bad about that. I actually wrote to every single individual member of staff that I felt was affected. And as you probably know, I mean, I actually went from 50 odd staff down there. It was actually 4 staff that stayed for within 3 weeks. Everybody else had gone. They were confused. There was rumors. They were reading crap in the papers. They were coming to their own conclusions. They were dealing with their own uncertainty. They were running for the hills. And I don't blame anyone for anything that they did or said or where they went, because people deal with it in their own way. And I've got to respect that. I saw enough prisoners dealing with it by trying to commit suicide. Everybody deals with things in their own way. You've got to hold a space for them for that, not judge them for it. And there wasn't a lot else I could do.
Yeah. So I guess it's a challenging one, because I think that the interesting thing I'm witnessing here is, firstly, the acceptance that the ego was completely out of whack from the beginning. And there must have been this interesting moment inside when the ego had to face up to the fact that it was directly responsible for a lot of pain. And as we say, this pain was probably caused by confusion, people not knowing what's going on, but nonetheless that confusion wouldn't have been there if these actions had not happened. So there must have been a very introspective moment inside where you kind of accepted that and the ego fell away. Where was that moment? When was that moment? Can you put your finger on it? Or was it a progressive thing that happened where you just came to a realization and, suddenly the beliefs around it changed?
I think because I was so isolated from what was actually going on, it took a while for that level of information to sort of filter into me. Sometimes we project our own model of the world out there, and we forget that we live in our own bubble, and Pentonville's certainly a bubble. But not realizing, I had so many hundreds of letters of support that was coming in. It was hard for me to get associated until I started talking to Thea, or had made aware of a few other people that were very unhappy. It was very hard for me to get associated to that. So it was a progressive awareness. After 2 to 3 weeks, it's like, well, hang on a minute, there's a real shitstorm happening here, and it's all right for you because you're protected from it, sitting there in a little room being fed every day. And we're dealing with all this mess outside, and there was a realization around that. It's like, well, actually, here's me thinking that everyone will see me as the victim being inside. That ain't the case. Get off your own high horse, Pete, and realize that you're dealing with this in here, and they probably wouldn't want to swap classrooms, right? But let's have some respect for the people that are actually not dealing with it as well as you'd hope they would. Because that was very myopic of me.
And being inside, of course, knowing the kind of person you are, I think anyone can see from looking at your videos that you're somebody who, it's just in your DNA, it's in your makeup to help and support people. You're in a place where there are a lot of people who probably at no time during their life have had any decent level of help or support, and this has ultimately led them to find themselves in this most notorious prison. So were there any examples of prisoners that you helped through difficult situations, or that you assisted in any way?
I went in there. One of the things that really helped me going in there was understanding what my identity was. I never saw myself as a prisoner, not for 1 second. Not from the time the judge said 18 months to walking in the doors, to the first door slamming. I never had the identity of a prisoner walking in. My identity was I was a secret agent of change. All right, that's what I took on, that's what I owned, and that's what I did. And so every chance I got, I was trying to help. And it's an interesting place. You've got drugs are just to order, on demand. What do you want? Heroin, crack, spice, mamba, marijuana. You just put your order in. You want a phone. It's like the state of the prisons is completely different to what most people perceive. Violence, absolutely epidemic. You're talking, 3 deaths was the worst week that I was there.
Wow.
Right? And that's between suicide or violence or overdose or what have you. Hospitalizations are a daily occurrence. Blood on the floor is a daily occurrence. You've got to be walking through the wings if you're lucky enough to be out of the cell, for a small amount of time. And this is like the animal kingdom, right? This isn't a sort of live and let live kind of environment. And so, I went to work in that environment trying to help as many people as I could. And, I'm very blessed to say, yes, I created an impact. The first thing I recognized was I can't really do it one-on-one that much because my time is limited. I want to help the prison system because I certainly saw so many flaws and fundamental issues with the system when I went in. it took me a while to realize the system doesn't want to be helped. Yeah, and I documented within 2 weeks, I've documented an entire plan, which I sent to the governor, on how not only could they solve most of the problems in there, but also save Pentonville alone £5 million a year, £5 million, sorry, a year, on a quantitative and qualitative analysis.
How well received was that?
I got a nice letter back, and basically that was it.
Okay. What was it nice to say? Thanks for your attempt.
Well, it did show support. I got a letter back from the governor basically saying that one of the aspects of the initiatives that I wanted to try to help with was they're very open to. And it was a new prisoner induction booklet that I wanted to put together, because when I went into that waiting room, I could tell who was new, who was seasoned, yeah, and the new people were like deer in the headlights. They had no clue. Their world had just finished, like Ali, for example.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to create a booklet that could be given to them that would give them a fighting chance of being able to steer their mindset in the direction that would help. Now, part of that would be a short story that would enroll them. And so I managed to write a short story that, if I was a prisoner coming in, it was my first time, what would I want to read that would actually help, that would allow me some subtle tools? Because you can't tell people anything. You tell somebody something, they won't own it, they'll kick back because they're defending their own model of the world. But if you enroll them as a third-party story and they get taken along for the ride, the awareness is that you can slip in there, they can be open to adopting. So I wrote something and I called it Mud or Stars. And it was taken after the old adage that, two men sat behind prison bars, one saw mud, the other saw stars. Meaning that the environment is the environment. That doesn't change. The outer world is the outer world. How you perceive the outer world is always the defining factor. And so I wrote this sort of short story. And I managed, don't ask me how, but I managed to get access to a computer, and I managed to get it printed, and I managed to get 30 or 40 copies done. It was a window of opportunity that I shouldn't have been unsupervised in, but you didn't have to ask me twice. And I started going through, when I was walking to the education and back, each day at the time they allowed me to do that, which I then got banned from. It's another story. But I was sliding it under doors, cell doors. I was leaving it on desks in the wings. I was putting it on a notice board. I was doing what I could to, secretly infiltrate the prison with this story. And it started having an impact. You could start actually hearing prisoners shouting mud or stars to each other to try to help the person that was down come up. Well, it started a bit of a movement. And I was actually nominated for a national award for that, which I found out only recently I just won.
Wow, really? Which award is this?
It was a Costa Award, which is like a national prison award for writing, and then along with a lot of the mentorship that I was doing with prisoners as I was in, because I thought I was going to be leaving Pentonville shortly, so I wanted to make an impact quickly. Turns out I was there for 4.5 months, but by the end of 4.5 months, there was many prisoners that were off antidepressants because of what I was doing. Or because of the impact that they were helping each other with through some of the stuff I was facilitating. I was reading the stories out in the Christian church service every Sunday. That gave me access to a wider audience and helped me facilitate reducing violence between the wings, which was a big issue. That's how naive I was. I remember I was talking to one person on the wing. He says, "Oh, have you got a cigarette?" I says, well, no, I haven't. He says, I need a cigarette. I says, don't mind me asking. He says, why did you ask to be moved to a non-smoking wing if you smoke? Oh, it's where my gang is. Now, when you arrive at Pentonville, you fill in a questionnaire about which gang you belong to in London. And they keep them separate in different wings to prevent some of the gang violence that's pretty much in there. And his gang happened to be on D wing. I didn't even know we had a gang. And I've been there for 3 months. That's how naive I was at that level. But I was able to try to reduce a lot of the violence between some of the most violent inmates through recontextualizing the experience of prison as well. In terms of, I'll give you an example. If you're a prisoner and something goes wrong, you get the wrong meal that you requested the day before. You fill in an option on there and it's not there. You get told that you're about to have exercise and it gets cancelled, which was common, 3 times a week. You get promised the fact that you could go to the library and it doesn't happen. Something, there's a mismanaged expectation. You don't recognize it as simply as the effect of a failed system, right? You take it out, you take it personally, and therefore you start to blame the nearest person, which is usually the guard. It's their fault. So now you get aggressive. And now, and that's where a lot of the violence towards the staff and the inmates, fellow inmates came from. It was frustration at kicking back against a system that was clearly fundamentally flawed, failing, and decaying. And so being able to get people to understand not to take it personally, but understand that, the toothache doesn't plan to upset you on your birthday. It's just the product of a decayed mouth. Right? So, when they started to understand that, and they started to see the guards as almost have a bit of understanding, compassion for that. They were just in there trying to mop up the mess. They're trying to essentially not have the pain or deal with the after effects of the pain of the system. And so there was a lot of violence that got reduced towards the staff, but through shifting the context of taking away the personal animosity, and realizing that they're essentially on your side in a sense to try to help facilitate you through this crap house of fundamentally flawed and politically flawed system. So that helped a lot. But the Mudhall Stars had a massive impact. I was very proud of that, not just in Pentonville but other places too.
Would as well. I think that's pretty impressive. And are you still in communication with any of the other prisoners that you?
Absolutely. In fact, there was one guy called Oliver, bless him, 15 years crack and heroin addict. Spent most of his life in and out. Completely a mess when I first came across him. He was on D-Wing, but I met him in the library. And, something about him. And I kind of took him under my wing, mentored and coached him for about 2 to 3 months. We got him off crack, we got him off heroin, we got him virtually off methadone by the time he left. And I spoke to him quite recently, and he's doing great. He's shifted his entire life, got out of his peer group that was keeping him in that sort of behavior. Just about to buy a home with his mum on near the coast. Now wants to go and help other addicts and reform them using some of the lessons that he'd learnt. And just a beautiful soul. And he wrote me a stunning letter, by the way. It was so touching. And he signed it because one of the things that was the biggest issue was he'd lost contact with his wife and kids. She wouldn't let him see the kids because of his addiction. And I even spoke to her on the phone from the wing at one point because he was shifting. He was making some great shifts. He wanted to, and he signed the letter, ex-offender, ex-drug addict, reformed offender, and proud husband to 3 beautiful kids. Who's now in contact with on a regular basis, and that's one of dozens of stories I could share.
Amazing. I think that listening to the positivity that you or the positive impact, should I say, that you had in the prison, leads me to an area of intrigue because, of course, in coming out of prison, all of these lessons and these experiences, one would imagine that they would change your view on things, or would they? Would be the question. And this is where I'm intrigued. So, how has the experience of this year changed your view on life, your approach to life, your approach to business, and your approach to coaching? Because I know that in terms of your time invested, these have been your key areas. So how are those 3 things going to change based upon the experience you've had this year?
Well, let's start with life. I see what happened. I mentioned about Bends in the River. It's what I call a graduation event. We're here. I believe life is a growth-centric experience. We've got 400 million years of fossil records not to argue with on that point. We're not here just to have a good time, survive, and survival of the fittest and the Darwinian mentality. That's pretty much old school. We're here to evolve into higher levels of more complex expression, or what physicists like Tom Campbell would call lowering entropy. And essentially, becoming more loving is essentially the destination that we trying to aspire to. And looking at graduation events are there to test you. I was thrown into a big graduation. I didn't ask for it, and most of us don't. Again, it could be an illness, it could be a relationship or a marriage breakdown, it could be something. We all have graduation events during our lives, and how we do on that is down to us. How did I do going through my graduation event? Well, it's not for anybody else to judge. That's for me to judge. Was it easy? Of course it wasn't easy. It's not meant to be easy. The Olympics are every 4 years. It's not easy to train for them, and when you get there, you perform or you don't. And you do the best you can. And I tried to do the best I could in there. Could have done better? Yeah, sure. Could I have made decisions differently that would have not put me there? Of course, but that's a waste of time arguing. Yeah, it's not about regretting anything. It's about looking back and say, what could I have done differently so that next time, yeah, I don't spill the milk, yeah, as such. But my view on life is that, you certainly can't take anything for granted. Yeah, apart from being able to have a relationship to life that if you know it's supporting you at some level, then you can trust where the bend goes. Yeah, I didn't ask to go to Pentonville. I didn't ask to let people. I didn't ask for anything. We don't ask for the tests that we get. Yeah, but how we deal with them is down to us. You know, could I have done better things than that? I'm sure I could. Could I have handled different things better? Of course I could. You know, I'm on my own journey, as we all are. But dealing with life now, one of the things that did come out of that was spending 6 months unplugged, outside of the day-to-day communication, outside of being, you know, access to the internet and your push notifications and your emails and everything else, and having an opportunity to essentially completely withdraw from a life that I was completely tied into, and that was profound for me. You know,
Give you a lot of thinking space.
Huge. You know, I journaled as well. In fact, I kept a journal with me the whole time. I had Thea send in a journal, and so after about 2 weeks, every single day I was writing, you know, journal anyway normally, and I was journaling my journey through that, and also keeping my magic moments, which was great. But after about 3 months, the journaling, the insights started becoming so much more profound. I mean, just like completely profound, you know. And you know, and from there, it was a case of just, you know, going with the flow. And it was from a lot of that the work that I'm doing right now essentially is going to another level. Where does intelligence come from? You know, did you know where your heart finds the intelligence to beat 100,000 times a day? No, it comes from a different place. So being able to channel that through and being able to bring that into my work now is very exciting for me. You know, to sort of take it to another level. But that's, in terms of shifting life, trusting life a lot more, that no matter what happens, I'll be okay. I never once felt in danger in Pentonville, even though there were people that were being carried out in stretchers. I never once felt threatened, even though there were certain times I'd go into pretty dangerous situations where it looks aggressive to see if I could diffuse it. Now, part of that's my training. Part of that's just probably rolling the dice, but wanting to help. And I've documented a lot of this as well. But in business, certainly taking business to a new level in terms of understanding from different perspectives that I was allowed to have from in there has been huge.
How do you mean?
A lot of my work centers around trying to give context to and simplify issues that people have in life that they can understand a little easier. Taking that to a whole different level with some of the awarenesses that I got, some of the metaphors that came through, that I'm very keen, very excited to share, with the work that I'm doing now. And I'm shooting a lot of videos that really, a lot of my latest videos, if you go and have a look, center around being able to give messages in ways that I discovered, shall I say, while I was inside. Having a lot more empathy for people. I was judgmental on, as much as I tried not to be. I probably still judge people, and going through the system and the process that the criminals themselves go through, and seeing how there's a lot of people in there that really shouldn't be there. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people in there that really should be there, but seeing how, like myself, life can turn on a dime, and 1 minute you're doing something you think is okay, and the next minute, bang, you're inside. And for those that don't have the tool set to handle that, the knock-on effect, the domino effect in their lives for the rest of their life for some of them can be traumatic, and some never recover. So having empathy for people that have gone through that level of situation was huge, certainly on the coaching side, for example. Understanding there's always a way. Again, that no matter how bad it gets, then people aren't fragile. You'll always be able to find a way if you shift your focus. That was the whole mud or stars aspect, by the way.
You said being thrown at the deep end, you either sink or swim, and I think that from witnessing at the start of this year the impact that you leaving had on some of the students who are perhaps closer to you and have studied with you at a higher level. It very much was like you going away and been a great test for them all, because it made them step into themselves, step into their moment. You know, if that makes sense.
There was kind of two sides to that. I mean, some people seeing me going into Pentonville, it was absolute positive confirmation for them that they shouldn't study my work, that I'm a fraud, that, you know, I don't practice what I preach, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, people all run their own levels of justification on that. And again, you know, depending on where your level of influence is, if it's the media, then, yeah, write me off. Yeah. Others would see it as absolute positive confirmation that I walk my talk, that what I practice, I preach. That you can put me into an environment that's not on stage, that's not got cameras with second takes, that's not got rehearsal, that's not contrived. You throw me into Britain's toughest jail and then see who shows up. Right? Are you able to walk your talk in there? How are you able to do it? What kind of impact do you leave? Who do you come out as? Yeah, do you learn some lessons? Yeah, are you able to leave an impact? Are you in alignment with what you teach, or are you all just full of shit?
Yeah.
And that, you know, was really has cemented, and I'm very grateful for a huge amount of support and fans that have since seen what's happened in there. Says, you know something? Yeah, okay, we all make mistakes. Yeah, but going through that and seeing what happened, yeah, I can trust him. Yeah, or I can learn from him. Yeah, you don't ask anybody to trust you. I mean, if the information works for you, great, go use it. If it doesn't work for you, don't. Yeah, there's many different teachers out there. But whether the glass is half full in your life or half empty doesn't change the volume of the glass. It only reflects your perspective of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to kind of bring a bit of full circle on this, because I think that anyone watching this will see that the journaling and the recording of the magic moments and falling back on your training was pivotal here. You know, you really stepped into yourself. And you shared with us the first magic moment. I'm kind of keen to know how many magic moments you picked up, because for most people, if you ask them how many magic moments they're going to have in 4 months in Pentonville, I can't imagine they're going to think a lot. So I'm intrigued to find out how many real magic moments.
I'll be very honest. I mean, I spent 4.5 months in Pentonville, which is kind of unheard of for a civil prisoner. But and there's clearly a reason I should have been there. Yeah, and yeah, I don't want to minimise because there was very tough times. You know, there was times I cried. Yeah, there was times where I missed the air. There was times where, you know, I questioned myself. There was times where, you know, you'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, yeah, and you know, all of the negative thoughts would start, you know, like a steam train coming in, and you'd try whatever you could to try to fend them off. You know, it wasn't all roses, but you know, as the entire sort of whole aspect to it, you know, I had an incredible adventure. Yeah, I really did. I don't regret anything that happened in there at all. You know, I can't regret going there because I don't deal with regret. Regret is futile. Regret leads to guilt, you know, which is the cancer of the human psyche. You can certainly look back and say, would I do something different, you know, if it happened again? And of course, you know, if I'm not learning that lesson, I should go back. You know, and yeah, I should be mindful of my ego. Yes, I should have really sat down with HP and really listened to what their argument was, you know, and found some level of validation in it and come to some deal. Rather than got on my high horse with the fuck you attitude and set out on a quest to prove them wrong. You know, because, you know, everyone's only projecting from their own model of the world. But what I learned, you know, in that respect, very simple, was that, you know, litigation is a tool. Dan Pena taught me that. You know, so litigation is a tool. In business, it's a chess game. And they were very good chess players. Yeah, and, you know, I didn't see how it was all set up in court, but, you know, I didn't see what they were going to do, but they played a fantastic game, and our game was lacking. But it was just a game of chess. You know, so, you know, from that side, there was a lot of lessons to learn, and again, about my ego and doing things differently. When it came to journaling, I actually wrote every 2 weeks because I still had my coaching clients. So my Elite Mentorship Forum, my Master Circle, I was mid-program through. I still had obligations to fulfill, so I did the best I could. I wrote, you know, they wrote in the questions, I wrote out the answers, and every 2 weeks I actually kept a documentation of what was going on in real time. And so that tracks the journey from literally walking in the door at Pentonville to walking out of an open prison 6 months later, where I spent my last 6 weeks in Sudbury. And you talk about magic moments, walking out of the prison after 6 months and thinking I was just going to see Thea, but seeing Thea and my 2 dogs, which I missed like mad, you know, and seeing, you know, like a welcome party that she'd put together that I wasn't expecting. That was magic moment number 200.
Wow, 200.
Now, I have 1,000+ magic moments for my life. I had 200 in the 6 months in prison, and I got them all written down. In fact, I'll share with you what 199 was.
Please do.
Right, because it was the night before. And in Sudbury is an open jail. I was there for my last 6 weeks. And I did the rounds. I'd walk around the perimeter. It has about a kilometre perimeter fence. And this is how crazy it is. They just built a fence around the prison to keep people out.
Wow.
Right? Not to keep people in. For years, Sudbury's had no fence. It's an open jail. Right? If you're going to leave, you're going to get set back to somewhere like Pentonville. So you'd be stupid to try and run away. But they built a fence to keep people out because you're having travellers that were coming using the showers. This is before I got there, right? The fence was there by the time I got there, but I'd only been there a few months. Monday nights was prostitute night. They'd have prostitutes come in, walk in, go and do or see whoever they would see. They would walk out the main gate where the families would be in the car park and pay the bill. I mean, that was, don't get me started. But they built a fence around Sudbury to keep people out. How funny is that? So I'd walk around the perimeter. It was about a kilometre. Now, if there's nobody there, it'd take me 10 minutes. But if it was a working prison, I was the only prisoner allowed not to work, so I was the only civil prisoner. I have different rights. But it would take me an hour to walk around normally because within 3 weeks of being at Sudbury, I'm the unofficial prison social worker, and I'm helping so many people, and I'm so proud of the people that were so willing, that wanted to be helped. But I walked around and I got one guy come up to me and says, "Excuse me." I said, "Are you the guy that wrote Mud or Stars?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He says, because I wrote it anonymously. Right? He said, "I thought so. Somebody said it was you." He says, "Would you mind coming to my cell to sign my copy?" Right? And I'm like, "Well, I did write it anonymously." I says, "But if you'd like me to, I'd be happy to." So we're walking there to his cell, and he told me a story. His name was Graham. And he was in his late 50s. And in his 20s, he'd had a wife and he had 2 young boys. And then he'd got divorced and he started a new relationship. But he'd always felt guilty as a father not being there for his 2 boys. He'd had a bit of an estranged relationship at that point. Obviously, the wife had probably put in a bit of poison with regards to that. And he'd always felt very distant, but always felt guilty about not being the father that he probably could have been had he stayed in that relationship. Common story. One of the sons grew up to be quite a notorious drug dealer and got caught. And the father thought, well, as a way to step in and help my son and sort of be there for him finally in, say, a time of need, I'll take the blame. Never committed a crime, not into drugs, but he stood up and took the blame so his son wouldn't go to jail, thinking that was a way essentially to show his son that he could be a good father. He got 4 years. He was halfway through his sentence. And he said to me, when he was telling me, he says, the lesson that he learned was his son never said thank you, never came to visit him, never supported his current wife financially. And he said, I realized it was me trying to buy off my guilt than actually, trying to help. But he was in there for 4 years and, he said, I just got the job as the prison, new prisoner induction officer, because the prison's ran by prisoners. It's a working prison. Now, from the day that I arrived in Sudbury, I wanted to try to make all new prisoners receive a copy of Model Stars. So I was trying to work with the guy that was responsible for the new prisoner inductions, but he was a cokehead. He was on cocaine every day. That's reality of prison life.
It's stunningly shocking to hear how free and easy drugs are. But it's just a little introduction there. It's insane.
No, it's just it's rife, and so it never really happened. So what I would do while I was in Sudbury is I would go and photocopy, because it was more liberal access to resources there. I'd go and photocopy Model Stars, and I'd go to deliver it on the new induction wing every day to the new prisoners. Kind of like just a mailman. And so walking around on my last night, and I'm sitting with Graham, and I signed his copy. He says, look, I hope you don't mind. He says, I've just got the job as the new induction orderly for the new inmates. He says, I read Model Stars. I thought every single person needs to have a copy of this. I photocopied 10 copies today and gave it to all the new prisoners. Would you mind if I kept on doing it? Amazing. My last night there, and that's what I tried to do from the day that I walked in.
Amazing.
And that was magic moment number 199. And then walking out the next morning was 200.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I think you've given us a very detailed description of the journey that you walked through, and thank you for that, because I think that you filled in a lot of the gaps that were there for a lack of context in the situation, because I think you've been very honest in saying your ego is certainly out of whack and there's things that you would do differently this time. But I think anyone watching this will be able to appreciate at some level how attacked you would have felt in those moments when this unjust situation, as you perceived it, came upon you and you were put under the cosh and everything like this. But you are a master at focusing on what's important and focusing on what is there to make the boat go faster rather than focusing on the negative. So I want to kind of conclude this with 3 key lessons that you learned that you would recommend to people. I think, you know, something around a graduation event, if somebody out there is facing difficult times right now, whatever it may be, whatever the context of their situation is, guidance that you would give them and some advice from something that you learned in your time in Pentonville.
I mean, I would say on that, Nick, that one of the first lessons is really stop being addicted to being right. You know, I went in there because I was trying to prove I was right, ultimately. Now, as it happens, when I came out, you know, because I went in for contempt, all of the accusations, if you recall, that still had to go to court. And, you know, I was quite happy to still stand my ground and defend that. And talk about not being addicted to being right. When I came out, I was actually called down to London. I went down to London to meet with HP. And I walked in, no lawyers, just me, all of their lawyers and all of their top guys they'd flown in. And the conversation was essentially about what has to happen for this not to go to court. And I was expecting it because I never saw this going to court. I thought it was just a ruse to try to squeeze some money out of me. And you know, it was ironic because I said, well, look, I've got no problem going to court. Yeah, I'm going to ask 4 questions to the judge. 1, how much money do I owe you? Right? Nothing. 2, where's the contract? Any contract. Yeah? Agreement. Terms and conditions that state that I wasn't allowed to resell any equipment. Right? There is none. Right? 3rd, if you knew that I was reselling this early on, why didn't you ask me to stop? Why? Because you were making money. More money than we were. Next question. Where in the history of anyone spending $17 million on HP equipment, have they ever bought it at retail? I could have gone to the market and bought it for an extra 2 or 3% into the wholesale market. That's this £17 million fallacy, right? So I'm like, and part of me was like, screw you. It's about time I went to court to be able to prove that I was right. And at that point I thought, whoa, hang on a minute. Am I not just running the same pattern? Have I not just learned anything from spending 6 months inside? And I'm like, let's shake hands and walk away. And they did. And we shook hands and, all allegations dropped. There was no fraud. There was no, 17 million loss. There never was. It was never about that. It was about, me having to learn some lessons. Right? And, and so if I'd have charged down that route, if I'd have said, no, screw you, I want to go to court because it'll finally clear my name, right? Knowing how court operates on the storytelling basis, I was defending myself at this point, it still could have gone the wrong way. I still heard enough horror stories in prison of people that really shouldn't be there. So I'm like, is that the lesson? Am I still trying to prove something? What part of me is saying that? The part that's still wants to be right. But hang on a minute, if they're going to withdraw all the allegations and everything and walk away and we're just going to shake hands, for some nominal agreement between us, then surely that's not vindication anyway. Right? And if I know that I'm right, why do I need to prove it? It's like, let it go. So, and they're only doing their job.
Yeah, of course.
I actually acknowledge, in the inside track, which was the journal that I kept, that I put in there, I acknowledged, as I said earlier, I think the judge made the right decision based on the information he had. How could he not? I think their counsel was incredibly competent. They spend a lot of money on them because they've got a lot of money. Another side lesson: don't pick on somebody that's got more money than you legally. Pick your battles. That's really the lesson there. So don't be addicted to being right. Don't believe your own bullshit.
I think that's so powerful as well, because how often do you see disputes between people that are based solely on that? And I think between intimate relationships as well. People can get so caught up in it, and and it can be. So I think that's a valuable lesson across many different situations.
Well, not just that. I mean, you got to understand that again. You got somebody knocking on the door over a business deal that they made way more money than you on, that you've done. You perceived nothing wrong, and they want to take your wife's to be's engagement ring away. I mean, who's not going to kick back? right? And as much as I probably should have handled myself better in that situation, which I should, yeah, I didn't, and I got caught up in it.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, was I in contempt? Yeah, I was in contempt. Yeah, at that level. Yeah. But even though the whole ring aspect was thrown out on appeal as the fact that it shouldn't have even been raised.
Okay, that's interesting as well.
You know, because it wasn't. It's like it's her ring.
Yeah.
It's got to do with my assets.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that's another story. But yeah, so don't be addicted to being right.
Mm-hmm.
Pick your battles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of my business mentors, Peter Thomas, wrote a book called Never Fight with a Pig. And it's essentially a case of, look, pick your battles. It would have been far easier and cheaper for me to be able to sit down with them and say, okay, listen, you've outmaneuvered me on the chessboard from a legal perspective through whatever you've done, in court. This is at the beginning of by getting the freezing order, by however you've represented it. You know, here's a few grand. Let's all shake hands, go away. It would have been easier there. Now, I wouldn't have had the adventure that I've had. I wouldn't have had the incredible magic moments. I wouldn't have had the journey. I wouldn't have had the lessons. So there's no regrets there at all. But would I do something differently next time? Yes. Third lesson, I would say, learn to trust life. Learn to let go of the need for certainty in terms of how life should fit your pictures. Know that if the river's going to bend, and every river bends, every river winds. There's no straight lines in nature. Why? Because if you want to get into it, the predominant aspect of life is non-physical. Right? Consciousness is non-physical. What's the primary pattern of non-physical? It's the wave. There's no straight lines. You know, everything is non-linear at its inception, at its genesis. So life is non-linear. And the stress comes from us trying to use the left brain to carve out a straight line for our life, and then realize that life's trying to pull back into a wave. So if you start to accept rather than resist, you can then take the energy that you would have spent resisting, which you can't change anything. The milk spilt, the milk spilt. But rather than invest energy whining and complaining and bitching or using it as a story to justify why you should be a victim, once you accept what is, that resistance drops. It frees up energy to be able to deal with what is in a more appropriate manner. And you can't do that if you're too busy resisting the bends in the river.
Three great lessons. I think fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think hearing you teach and give guidance at the end there, it leads me to kind of make one final inquiry, and I guess that's around the model in which you're going to teach from now. Because again, I myself have been through 3 of your seminars, your business school seminars, which, for anyone that hasn't been to them, are just this 3-day sea of emotion. For anybody that goes through it, I've got a few hundred people I call friends now because I met through this incredible experience. And I know that one of the big questions that I had throughout the course of this year is what's going to happen with the next business school, with the next seminar. So I really want to kind of cover that momentarily now. We've seen quite clearly there's new lessons that you have to teach. And how does that look? Are you going to do another seminar? Is this an avenue you're going down, or is it something you're leaning away from now? What's the strategy for teaching, I guess, is the question.
Well, a couple of things. One thing that came out of my time inside was it reconnected me with my passion for writing. So, I've been wanting to put some books together. I've got some frameworks. Like the Inside Track was kind of the first.
Which is available now.
Yes, you download the Inside Track, and that gives you my journey from start to finish through prison. But it's also a how-to manual on how to deal with adversity. And I wrote this really for the Elite Mentorship Forum and the Master Circle. It wasn't really for public sort of consumption. But when I came out and I reread it, and there's 11 volumes, there's 11 chapters, 11 letters that I wrote. And I talk about the suicide interventions that I did in there, how I stopped people killing themselves, but not what I did, how I did it, so that you can do it at home. How am I coping with the fact that somebody pulls out a knife and nearly kills somebody in the shower?
Wow.
How do you deal with fear? How do you deal with the face of losing everything? Not a sob story, a how-to manual. So no matter what you've got going on in your life, you'll be able to get some benefit from. And that's what I tried to get for them. And when I came out and reread it, I'm like, there's a lot of other people could get some value from this. So that's why we decided to publish it. It wasn't planned while I was in there. It was more contained for my coaching clients. But I think it's adding so much value to so many people. I just want to give it as a gift to the world on there. So it connects my passion for writing, but I got so many insights to upgrade the syllabus on what I teach that the next Sage Business School I'm very excited about, because it's going to be very different. There's going to be a lot deeper levels of lessons. There's going to be a lot more practical applications. There's certainly been some lessons in business that I've learned from dealing with HP and the legalities around that, which are useful because we live in a world now where if you sneeze on the street, somebody wants to sue you. Yeah, it's knowing how to protect yourself or navigate that minefield is very useful. And I had the whole aspect of people saying, well, how can you teach business and where's your credibility when you've gone inside? I'm like, well, hang on a minute. I'm not a criminal. Yeah, that's people forget that because they read the media and the media says, oh, yeah, businessman, £17 million fraud jail. Yeah, and they join the dots in the wrong order and it's completely false. But Sir Richard Branson has a criminal conviction for fraud in business. Yeah, is that going to stop me from learning it from him? Of course not. Right? People make mistakes. People learn from those mistakes and move forward. Now, if you make the same mistake 2 or 3 times, and you're running a pattern, then that's something to question, and that may not be in business. That could be your 3rd failed marriage before you finally understand that it's not about you and you learn what unconditional love is. Yeah. It could be your 3rd mild heart attack before you realize you've got to stop drinking and smoking. Right? Everyone's on their own journey. So, I'm very humble and grateful to be able to bring some of the lessons, and a lot of the lessons that the prisoners taught me. This wasn't all me giving stuff out. This was me looking at people who were in situations that I would have been struggling with. I mean, you imagine being in jail for most of your life and what that would do to you institutionalized, and still seeing people go up and express kindness at certain levels and wanting to find out what made them do that and how they could dig deep and learn something from that. So, there's a lot of lessons I want to bring in. I'm very, very excited to be able to continue my work teaching because, again, apart from doing it through writing, if anything, this year has shown me that my life's mission is going to continue to be able to go and help people, whether they're in prison, whether they're in boardrooms, whether they're on the street, whether they're on a private jet, whether they're, Joe Average like you and I in the street. It doesn't matter. Everyone's on a journey. If I can help somebody take the next step a little further down the road, my job is just to shine a little torch in front so that they can be invited to walk a path that's more in tune with their growth and development and greatness. Then that's why I'm here. I'm not going to stop doing that anytime soon.
I can see the way you just lit up talking about it, so I wouldn't think that was a good idea to stop either. And again, as I say, going through the experience 3 times myself and speaking to everybody that went through it as well, it's changed many, many lives. And I guess the final question would be, do you have a date set in place for this? Is the plan?
Yeah, we're going to be launching in Next Stage Business School in February 2018. And I'm probably the most excited person to be there. And again, you sit there and it's 2 a.m. and you've got a tiny little cell and it's pitch black and you can hear screaming and chairs banging and abuse being shouted and you've just learned that all your staff have left and the newspapers are slagging you off and are you ever going to teach again? And then I wrote a sign that I put above the door that I would read over and over again. And it was a quote from Napoleon Hill. It said, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. Now, you don't know what the benefit is at that point. That's the growth. That's the muscle that needs to grow, that you have to trust that there is something there. Because if you're looking at the adversity, you're too busy moaning about that, you're never going to water the seed of that benefit. And so, I visualized, I hoped, I prayed, I'm like, will I teach again? Will I be able to get out there, or is this it? And I knew the answer. You can't stop a natural expression of you. If you're born to sing, you may get a sore throat. That's not going to stop you. If you're born to be able to go out and give your gift, as we all are, at whatever level that is, it's going to take damn sight more than 6 months in jail to be able to stop me doing that.
Amazing. Well, it's been wonderful talking with you, and thank you for filling in the gaps that you have, because I feel like you really haven't held back. I don't feel like there's an area that I couldn't have touched on at all, and I felt like I could have done it because I needed to. So I thank you for that.
No, it's a pleasure. Nothing to hide. Everyone's got their own agenda, and no matter how thin you slice something, there's always 2 sides. And I'm very grateful you gave me the opportunity to share a little bit of mine. And again, everyone's on their life journey, and I'm just very privileged to hopefully play a small role in leaving a positive thumbprint on some others.
Fantastic. Well, Peter Sage, thank you so much.
Pleasure's mine.